Welcome to today's webinar, Reimagining the Role and Design of Procurement with our corporate member, Michael Page, and our Queensland chapter president. I'm Monique Fennick from Australasian Supply Chain Institute. And before we introduce our keynote, I'd like to run through some housekeeping for the webinar. Firstly, a technical check to ensure that everyone can hear me. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Wonderful, thank you so much. If you're having any technical difficulty, please open the chat appearing on your screen now and start a new message to the panel, and we'll give you a hand. Two other housekeeping items. We'll be running some polls throughout the webinar, which we will publish anonymous results. So please help us to keep today's interactive as possible and respond to those polls. The Q&A section is not anonymous. Instead, it allows you to post your questions to the panel and for other attendees to see. So please use this opportunity, and at the end, our keynote will have some time to answer your questions. We'll be awarding one CPD point to attendees from today's webinar. Just type CPD in the Q&A box so that we can record who needs a point to go towards your registration or certification maintenance. Thanks. The webinar is recorded and will be uploaded to the ASCI resources library for members tomorrow. And a closed LinkedIn group post will be created for further discussions with our keynotes after today's webinar. So without further ado, to kick off, I'd like to introduce our co-host for today, Fergus Cox. I'll ask you to unmute yourself, Fergus, and also allow your video to be active so we can see you on the screen. Great, thank you. Fergus has been working with Michael Page for 4 years now, and more recently as manager of Page Personnel, Logistics and Operations, specialising in logistics, manufacturing and construction, operator level, casual and permanent placements. Welcome, Fergus.
Monique, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Fergus and I run both our casual labour hire division as well as our professional supply chain division in Queensland. I'll start off briefly by talking about our procurement division, which is run by Bree Clements, who unfortunately cannot make it or cannot be with us today. She's noticed that a lot of companies have become a lot more focused on procurement specialists that have experience within their particular warehouse management or inventory management systems. There's certainly been an increase in the requirements for contract and vendor managers. And Bree has also noticed an upswing in what we call our blended supply chain and purchasing positions as well. From an operational perspective, I've noticed an increase in the amount of hands-on warehouse supervisors and managers in Brisbane and surrounding areas, with the amount of positions that you can actually see on Seek and other job boards. Salary-wise, these operational hands-on positions have stayed relatively static year on year. And if anything, we've seen some of the smaller companies actually reduce their budgets for these positions. I've also noticed that the smaller to mid-sized companies, rather than coming to agencies, have actually done a lot of their own recruitment in-house. And finally, on a positive note, for senior supply chain managers, I've seen that we've actually been recently approached by a number of national and also local clients and new clients who have asked us to source, I guess, supply chain experts, and they're really looking for a fresh set of eyes to really dissect their end-to-end supply chain and focus on process improvements. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for joining again, and hope you get some good takeouts from this session.
Great, thank you, Fergus, and we'll ask you to join us at the end for the Q&A section if you wouldn't mind muting yourself and turning your video off for now. Now to introduce the ASCI Queensland Chapter President, James Scotland. James has been the Queensland Chapter President for ASCI now for over a year, and is currently engaged by the Australian Industry Group and the Federal Department of Industry, Innovation and Science as a national supply chain facilitator. James's role is to assist and enable SMEs to prepare for and to assess global supply chains. His clients include Volvo Group Australia, Shell, QGC, Bustech Australia and the Australian organics industry. So I'll now hand over to you. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Monique, and thank you, Fergus, for that introduction. The Australian Supply Chain Institute, for those who don't know us, is a professional accreditation body determined to professionalise supply chain management and operation in Australia. And it's great to get that overview from Fergus on what's happening in supply chain in terms of personnel, because I think it highlights just how important this whole concept of end-to-end integrated supply chain is becoming, and how important it is to have professionals in this space. Next slide, please, Monique. The accreditation system run by ASCI, I'll just do a quick ad for you. The accreditation system run by ASCI is a full accreditation system within the guidelines of education in Australia. There's a technical committee to explain and to explore what the latest is in supply chain. There's an ethics committee that looks at how we operate as supply chain professionals, and there's a risk committee. Thanks, Monique. And all that leads us to a number of different possible post-nominals for you. For anyone wishing to become a supply chain professional, they can focus on one particular part of supply chain, operations, logistics, procurement, or be across the whole supply chain and become a professional supply chain manager. Thanks, Monique. That's indicated here by this slide, which looks at the different aspects of supply chain and where each of those post-nominals sit. So you can look at the plan, the source, the production, the delivery, and the logistics part of supply chain, or as I said, look at the whole supply chain. If you want to know more about how you become accredited, contact us on the on our website, or contact any of the speakers here today. But ASCI is more than just professional accreditation. It's about professionalising the industry. And so the two other activities that we do, one is to run these networking type committees, networking type functions. We have meetings every month when we're allowed to actually have meetings, when we can meet face to face, and we also have these webinars. That's to enable networking and exchange of ideas, but also to support our third pillar, which is thought leadership, knowledge management in supply chain. Supply chain is changing rapidly. The concept of it, the operation of it, the functions of it are all changing rapidly. Technology, people, and processes and thinking is all changing. And our job is to get us all together in the supply chain sector and to think through what's happening, what needs to happen, and to be the thought leaders in this area. I encourage all of you to attend a local state meeting and to keep engaged with these webinars, which leads me to today's topic. A key part of the change in supply chain is with our old friends in the procurement sector. Nothing's going to really happen in supply unless we have an effective procurement. And when you think of effective procurement, you think of Andy Brightmore, our keynote speaker for today. He's had 20 years experience across a number of different countries and organizations. Andy and I have worked together. I know he is committed to helping SME suppliers to access the large buying organizations in Australia. He's committed to being at the leading edge of procurement and supply chain. He is in the leadership team of the Chartered Institute of Procurement, and we could not find, if we tried, a better person to help us understand what's happening in procurement today than Andy. One of the ways in which we know that he's particularly good at managing supply is that he is the father of 3 children and they're all still alive, so he must be doing pretty good there. With that introduction, can I ask you, Andy, to pick up the baton and explain to us what's happening in procurement, particularly in diversified supply chains?
Well, thank you, James, for the fantastic introduction. My kids will be delighted that their health was at risk. I'll try and keep them whole. Look, firstly, thank you very much to the team here for allowing me this opportunity to speak to a lot of people. There's some faces or some names in the participants I know good to see good friends in there. There's even some members of my team in there who will critique me relentlessly after this if I do a particularly poor job. But there's lots of new names in this list of hopefully people I'll get the opportunity to meet along the way as the COVID restrictions start to lift for us all to the next degree. I'm grateful to also Fergus and Michael Page Group. They're not only great supporters of this particular profession, but also for the work they do with the Chartered Institute of Procurement, who I spend a lot of time trying to support and have taken advantage from as a member and now a fellow for the last 24 years, I think it is. They're great allies of our combined profession. And I think it's true to say, you know, James and I have a shared soapbox, and today is a bit of a soapbox session for me, especially if you've heard me talk about some of these themes in the past. When I started in procurement, it was called purchasing. Back then, supply chain and purchasing were interchangeable terms depending on who you talk to, which organization you sat in. And that's not the case now. Procurement, purchasing and supply chain tend to be interchangeable terms. And that used to cause me a lot of angst in my kind of technical academic days. But actually, I've kind of come full circle to, whilst it does still grate on me that it shows a level of still work we have to do to help organizations understand the nuances between each of those roles. The reality is, from a supply chain point of view, in front of the customer, and we will talk about customer in a little bit, the customer needs, wants, believes, assumes that all of the components that each of you represent come together in a unified way to provide the best supply chain performance and cost advantage to the organization, to the customer. So seeing them in a fragmented way actually, I think, makes us poorer than if we were truly to combine under one total supply chain umbrella. So Monique's going to do the movement along. We're going to do a little poll in a second, but just to give you a bit of a deeper history about my background, other than being really good at clip art icons. I started off in the military, which has some plaudits for being fairly good at logistics and moving things around the place. Then moved into the car industry with Toyota, that has a phenomenal ground for learning the core principles behind the Toyota production system and FIFO and JIT and Kanbans and all that great stuff. Then through domestic appliance, into GE and Honeywell globally, and then into consultancy for a number of years, helping companies who either have a different need from the procurement organization they've got, or broadly companies in distress looking to get more from their cost base as they transform their organization. And now I'm very proudly able to be part of the board of Compass Group Australia, which is the world and Australia's largest food service organization. And the unique part, I think, about my particular procurement role is that I'm also proudly able to represent an organization called Food Buy, which is the procurement function of Compass, but actually turned into a standalone customer-facing organization in its own right with our own customers and clients. And that's really sits behind the context of what we're going to talk about today. Importantly, I'd just like to know a little bit more about the audience I'm talking to today. So I think Monique's going to pop up a poll which asks you just to nominate which of those ASCI boxes you can see across the bottom you currently sit in, or where your particular discipline lies. So if you could please populate your poll, we'll get a flavour of who we're talking to today. And I think when we've got enough respondents, Monique will pop up the results of that. Excellent, thank you. So heavy weighting towards the plan and source, some procurement people on the call, but good representation right through the 5 pillars there. And just for clarity, I do think procurement leaders, procurement senior professionals are much more rounded when they've had some experience in each of these 5 pillars and the roles and tasks inside them. I've shaded in yellow the roles I've had in the past that kind of shows I've not just been a procurement guy, but I have some appreciation for some of the other disciplines that make us a fully rounded supply chain. If you can move on, please, Monique. So a little bit about our business. There's some stats down the side. You can see that as a procurement department, now we're a procurement outsourcing business in the food industry. We've got quite a few professionals in our business that move quite a large amount of products right across Australia every single day, from CBD to offshore oil rigs to the middle of the Pilbara. Our clients at the top there span everything from hospitals through aged care, resources industry, fine dining, hotels, office blocks, and education. And our team, albeit a procurement business, comprise many different types of talent. So we're a business that not just is made up of procurement people and great analysts managing data, but we also have technology architects, supply chain coordinators, client-facing account managers, essentially a procurement call center, and logistics professionals that help us just not to negotiate and contract fantastic relationships with suppliers, but really focus on the quality of the execution and everything that sits behind that, from DC management to stock turns and everything else, to really be able to focus on a performance to the customer that just surprises and delights. And you can see, unlike many procurement organizations, we have metrics around DIFOT, around compliance, similar to some organizations, but many metrics you'd expect to see more in a warehousing environment, which shows that, you know, we really do look at the full scale of not just the cost side and the value side, but we actually see value being on very much core to the service. If you could move on, please, for me, Monique. So what I'm going to talk about in the very short time I have with you today is three of the areas that I've kind of learned over time. And these are my kind of three soapboxes, if you will, that really have been the foundation of us building this food buy business and transitioning from a department into a standalone organization. I think also, very importantly, they're the same three principles that I've used and seen used very well by others from a departmental basis. So whether you have the opportunity to sit in a client-facing organization or you sit in an internal department, I hope from today I sow some seeds of thoughts for you as existing leaders or as future leaders that will help you shape your view of how you want your function to perform and how to build its fundamentals going forward in the future. So we'll start off with another quick poll, if I think, please, Monique, on the next slide. Or are we into the next slide? There we go. So let's talk about stakeholders. We're going to talk about stakeholders in a second, but if you could give us a view of how you feel the quality of your stakeholder engagement and the trust your stakeholders have in you, your function in your organization. Just a gut feel, where would you describe that today? And let's have a look at the results of how you feel. And again, when we get enough respondents to that, Monique will push up the results. There we go, excellent. So a good spread there, but not untypical to see more of a middle ground in there. Generally good, very much dependent on personalities, and I suspect the roles those personalities have in the business, and clearly tough, especially right now in our organisations where we're all faced with many different usual and unusual priorities in the COVID environment. So thank you for that. If you move on to the next slide, please, Monique. So my view is stakeholders are a myth. I don't believe in stakeholders. I often joke that unless you're hunting vampires, you're not a stakeholder. And this, I think, has been fundamental for me over many years in thinking about organizational design and organizational outcomes. But it's really right at the heart of our food buy business and how we've structured ourselves from an internal department to a externally facing client-centric organization. So the reason I don't like stakeholders is I think it's a term that's too generic. I think it's too broadly used to the point where sometimes it's almost used satirically. And what it generally implies to me is that it implies a kind of level playing field between the project manager or people in the project team and the recipients of the outcome of the project. One of the definitions from the project management organization of a stakeholder, you can see at the top there, and the bit I really, really don't like, but I think it's really true to the point, is that stakeholders are defined as having an interest in the success of the project. They have an interest. It's nice that they have an interest, but it's really what sits behind that interest that I think really drives behaviors. You can have an interest because your role dictates. You can have an interest because the political environment says you should. You can have an interest because you personally benefit from it or your function benefits from it. But interest is kind of interchangeable. And it really places a mutual engagement obligation on the project or the team and the suite of stakeholders, who are all very, very different. One size never fits all, to come together in a belief in a shared outcome. How we built our business is around believing that everybody outside of our team is a customer. And even within our team, the handoffs between one part of our business and another part of our business, we treat those handoffs as a handoff to a customer. And I think if you really spend time thinking about this in your organization and kind of posing a question to yourself, something quite fundamental can happen here in your business and fundamentally positive. I think if you come from an approach that, what if everybody in the business, your other functions, your departments, the broader organization, the board, the CFO, whoever can possibly be defined in that RACI diagram as a stakeholder at one point in time, what if they had the choice, like every customer does, of whether to use you and your service and your organization or to use somebody else? And if they had that choice, how would you think differently about how you present yourselves to them, how you wrap that proposition, that service up, how you sell the outcome, how you define value? And I think a lot of the time, procurement people typically can fall into a trap of sitting down and saying, this is the value, this is how I define value that I'm giving to stakeholders, rather than spend time engaging with customers to say, what do you believe is valuable? What's value to you? And often, hopefully, they'll have a shared core, but there will be nuances either side that the customer perception, the stakeholder's perception of what they find valuable will be news to the procurement or the project manager. And I think if you can go through this logic of believing that everybody outside of your team is a customer, and you have to earn the right to their engagement, and you certainly have to earn the right for their ongoing loyalty by repeated great engagements, it can have a fundamental impact on how you think about the products you have, the solutions you deliver, the language you use, the reporting you provide, and really how you want people to participate in the great value, the great service, the great talent you have in your business. And our Food Buy organization, before we launched it, we spent almost 2 years as a leadership group and as individuals within the team coming together to say, if we are going to treat everybody, even our own organization being a department at the time, as a customer, how does that ask us to change what we do, how we do it, how we engage, and what our customer thinks is good value from us, not good value we're giving to them? And it has been, I think, fundamental in it, and it's core to our business. Monique, if you would, please. So another little poll, we're going to talk about data in a second. So Monique will pop up a poll, and I think data is very much a consistent theme across most advising organizations currently, especially those in the technology space. If you'd be good enough to give us a view of how well do you think your organization both uses data, but uses that data to convert it into insights that help drive overall success. And again, when we get enough participants, we'll pop up the results of how we feel about our organizations and their use of data. Excellent. Thank you very much. So I think we can all see there that a good spread again, but more of us sit in the sometimes to mostly rather than being data-centric organizations. Next slide, if you would please, Monique. Again, no kind of surprises there. It's actually probably healthier on the mostly than many other polls that ask the similar questions. And this is a real strong learning for me over many years. The organizations, whether it be from a procurement context or from any context, that seem to really do consistently well are organizations that truly understand and appreciate the value of data within it. Especially nowadays, we're changing demands of our customer, both immediate and end customer, the continued growth of technology and the convenience of technology, and the shortage consumer time to acquire and absorb information before they move on to the next question. Long are gone are the days where you would sit in a library to research something. You now go to Google and Google has the answer instantly, and the implicit trust is there. So our consumer absorption rate and therefore their appreciation rate is a lot higher in terms of it's more demanding, but it's a lot more immediate, and they want accessibility, and there's an implied trust there, and you break that trust at your peril. So we've actually gone quite appreciably away from thinking of ourselves as a procurement organization, albeit that's what many great talented people in our business do, into being an organization that is driven by data. And right at the center of our business is a massive investment in not just the acquisition of data, but the collection, the management of that data, and then really most importantly, the visualization of it, and from visualization, converting that into insight. And the way I tend to think about this is data is good because it is underlying to our business. Many of you live in roles, whether you be S&OP planners, demand schedulers, forecasters, warehouse inventory managers. Good data is absolutely key to understand what we have around us and therefore what we're going to do with that, whether it's a working capital improvement or whatever it may be. But actually, data is phenomenally powerful when given to your customer so that they can self-serve. There's value in having people being able to search themselves. Remember, we spend little time going to shops now and walking around the racks and touching and feeling all the different clothes and things, but we spend a lot of time on the internet accessing pictures and accessing the data of the products that we think we might like to buy. Data-rich environments tend to have a greater connectivity to the end customer than a conversational environment. People tend to trust data foremost and then look to the relationships around it to confirm that loyalty. So data drives insight, but actually insight is a commodity, and a commodity has value. If you can provide insight, your worth to your customers becomes exponentially more valuable. You're not just providing them data to say, this is what we know, this is the empirical truth, this is what's happening, which many of us do with data. The client will say, okay, can I have it? Can I touch? Can I play? Can I see? Can I flick through? Can I shop? What can I do with this great data? And then essentially what you're now giving them is a product. You'll give them access to perhaps data that your organization has thought of as entirely confidential and you can't possibly share. It's your competitive advantage. But now you can turn it into a product. When you've got a product, it's valuable, it's sellable. Whether it's sellable for dollars or sellable for relationship, it has value. Now, if you can take that data and you can bring talent into your business, and there is it's a very unique talent, I think, that's able to read data versus reading words. You see this a lot in the stockbroker world, and people read data. If you can provide insight based on data, you're now empowering clients with information to help them make choices. And when you empower customers and you give them a product, then that is much more valuable from an engagement point of view than just giving them a set of numbers on a spreadsheet and saying, there's the facts. And if you do this consistently, not only are you empowering them and you're giving them a valuable product, you're now creating the basis for ongoing loyalty because they can see what's behind the words and you're bringing them opportunities. It could be recommendations of cost savings. It could be recommendations on inventory management and logistics, but you're providing empowered insights for people to make their own decisions to drive success themselves. Again, the difference between a stakeholder has an interest in your success, and a customer who assumes they're going to be successful personally from their interaction with you. Next slide, please, Monique. Last poll for you all. So we're going to talk a little bit about your identity as a business. So if you could give us a view of how emotionally invested are you in the identity, the branding of the business that you work in, if you're currently employed in the business versus being a student, or the identity of your educational house, or even the identity of your team. How do you feel about the alignment and the investment of you personally with that identity? And again, when we've got enough respondents, Monique will share the results with us. And my thanks everybody for participating in the polls. I hope they were interesting for you to see where you sit amongst the rest of the audience, as it certainly is for James, Fergus and I to see as well. Wow, okay, so 79% of you feel emotionally invested in the identity of your business. That is absolutely fantastic. Only 2% feel there isn't a defined identity. That's a great outcome and not a typical usual one. The 19% in the middle there, and I'm obviously assuming that when you say you're absolutely invested, it's a positive investment, but 19% there, not really. And I think there's a real opportunity here. Monique, next slide, if I may. So I truly believe in any organization, in any function, in any department, no matter what the size, whether it's 2 or 3 people to a team of 50 people to an organization of 100,000 people, having an identity is absolutely key to the outcomes that you drive. For those of you who watch Simon Sinek, he talks a lot about your tribe. And tribe is just another great way of saying your collective identity. Great quote there from the Incredibles movie. For those of you who've got young kids, you've probably seen that at least once, that movie, where they say your identity is your most valuable possession. Protect it. And it does. Identity leads to a purpose. If you have an identity, then you can really sit down and say, what is our purpose? What is my individual purpose? What's our collective purpose? And if you have a purpose, then again, a purpose has value, it has weight. If you can explain to your customers what your identity is, who you are, and what that converts into a purpose, and then into values, and I've shown our values there that we very, very proudly stand by. And our team actually constructed themselves. We took all the management guys out of the room and said to our team, build the business that you want to be part of. And this was the value set they defined for us. What you now have is a cultural ecosystem based on belief. So if your people in your team fundamentally believe in the identity of the team they're part of its purpose and the values they hold themselves and each other accountable to, that defines their behaviors, that underpins your culture. When that's strong, that is an amazing, amazing place to be in terms of not just making sure you've got great, talented people committed to your business, but they'll actually take ownership of that business and their pride in that business. They will grow the business for you rather than the leaders grow the business and everybody provides a service. Our team feel that they are actually building the business they want to be part of. And then when you take that belief outside your doors, you share that belief with your customer base. And a shared belief is an amazingly powerful thing. The purpose between your client organization and you can be quite different. Purpose is personal to your organization. Shared values are immensely powerful, but they don't have to be articulated in the same way. But gaining a shared sense of belief stands behind trust. And when you have belief, then belief drives successful outcomes more consistently than tasking and just performance measures and KPIs. And I think, for those of you that read the Harvard reports or the major consulting advisory firm reports, you'll see a consistent themes that organizations that have a core identity and a defined purpose and values tend to be more successful over time, both from an investor in the stock market, but driven by obviously customer engagement and sales and revenue. But employees, the talent that you spend a lot of time cultivating, training, bringing into your organization to deliver your products, they tend to be more satisfied and up to 5 times more likely to stay with a purpose-driven organization than those that don't feel they are in a purpose-driven environment. So for the success of whether you continue to use stakeholders or you change to translating everybody outside your environment to being customers, purpose drives belief, trust, loyalty, and engagement and relationships. And in our business, we're in the food and hospitality business. Everything we do is about relationships and the authenticity of that relationships. So please, for those of you who are leaders, those of you aspiring to be future leaders, I strongly urge you to think about the value of identity. It can be the overall company identity, it can be a team identity, your shared suite of values, and how that really defines the purpose of what drives your organization forward and the services you provide to others. Next slide, please, Monique. So right now, we live in a very interesting time, certainly in Australia. We're part of a global organization, so it's globally very interesting at the minute. We don't start meetings anymore, such as this one, with let's make sure we turn our devices off and we respect each other's thoughts and opinions. We now start with, if you hear my dogs barking in the background, please forgive me. And if the helicopter goes over the house and my internet breaks down, I'm sorry. It's a very, very different dynamic that we're all sitting in. For our industry in Australia, we have been operating through just an industry that has been smashed relentlessly, from drought and the longest, deepest, most penetrating drought in recent Australia history, through to bushfires, which not just affected the public and our consumers, but also our people and where they live and they work. And right now, obviously, we're all sitting in this COVID environment that, whilst we're all in it together, means very different things to very different people in terms of where they sit in their organizations and when they sit personally. So really, I think when I look at the success of my team and the people I'm very blessed to be able to represent here today, they have been phenomenally successful in a number of lenses through these kind of waves of challenges, and really fundamentally to the 3 points we talked about. So with each one of these events, we've sat down and we've said, what is our purpose? How do we translate our purpose through each of these environments? How do we help? Our purpose is built around how do we help? Our relationships with our suppliers, which are absolutely key to our business, and then with our customers, which we spend a lot of time, as I said, working on customer engagement, loyalty, and depth of positive relationship through insights. Who do we help? All of our clients are impacted differently. Some of our clients have been stood down through this period. Some of them are actually thriving in very different ways. Who do we help and how do we help them? And then how do we use this data to truly understand risk? From a procurement context, you look at supply-based continuity, but there's lots of risk out there. And how do we use this data to identify this risk, convey this risk, and provide risk-based insights to our customers for many things they haven't even contemplated yet, because they're thinking about their broad organization, not just the element we provide. That's where we really look like we're providing market-leading insights, because we own this space and we should be the deepest thinkers in there. And ultimately we say to our customers, what do you need? Not to our stakeholders, this is what we've been asked to provide you, or this is what the organization wants us to deliver collectively. We sit in front of the customer and say, right now, in this instant, with the challenges you've got, what do you need us to do? And then it's up to us to be agile to move towards that. And right now in COVID couldn't be a kind of more purpose-driven environment. Our team sat down and said, okay, every dollar we save, whether it be from productivity through cost savings, negotiations, driving compliance, every single dollar helps to sustain somebody's employment in our business or in our customers' businesses. And this was long before JobKeeper obviously came, helps them have continuity of income from their family for as long as possible. And that really has been fundamental to how the team have grabbed hold of a very difficult environment, come together despite their own individual family, personal challenges, and move towards how do we keep focused on keeping our customers whole. And I think the question we asked ourselves at the start of this is, how do we behave? How do we stay true to our purpose? How do we stay true to our identity? How do we stay true to the customer rather than retreat into an interdepartmental view? And what we knew was how we behaved before any of these crises in our normal day-to-day job, how we worked with suppliers, how we treated suppliers from conglomerates to SMEs to our indigenous suppliers, which we're very proud of the investment we work in that space. And that's some of the work that James has been doing with us historically. How we have worked with these people in the past will determine how they will exercise their relationships and their trust in us to help us get through this. And we have not had one drop in continuity of supply through the COVID era. And we're very blessed and lucky to be able to say that. How we have behaved through the crisis, most importantly, will determine how we're remembered by the suppliers and our customers in many, many months long from now. So without that identity, without that purpose, without those values, and more importantly, without the belief that we can behave to those values collectively and hold ourselves accountable to them and show them, I don't think that many, many months from hopefully when all of this has returned back to whatever the new normal is, I think how we behave will be fundamental to customers, prospective customers and our suppliers, and most importantly to me, the talent in our business, saying we held true to our values. We're a purpose-based organisation, and our reputational strength will grow exponentially through it. Last slide, please, Monique. So now, as I kind of wrap up those bits, this is how I kind of describe our food buy business to anybody who wants to know more about our food buy business. I'll take them through the values of who we are. I'll take them through how we look after our people and cultivate our talent. But this is fundamentally how we see our business, or how you see it. Purpose sits in the center of everything we do. Data and insight enables everybody in our organization to drive and deliver and find value and opportunity. And then a combination of our talent converted into products in front of our customers, linking the supply side capability to delivering just great performance for customers every day relentlessly. That underpins our success as a business, and I think for many, many years to come. So with that, I want to thank you all for bearing with me for half an hour as I've kind of gone through some of my soapboxes. I hope some of it has resonated with you. I'm more than happy to try and answer any Q&A in the time we have left. But I know also Monique will probably connect any that we haven't been able to answer, and I'll do my best to respond to people outside of this forum as well if we don't get to you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. That's sensational, and thank you for quite a detailed introduction to your thoughts there. I'm particularly pleased to hear you talk about people plus data plus culture. I think that is the three drivers of supply chain and business today, and the three are connected, and often they're not discussed in one group. So thanks for that, and congratulations on maintaining a supply chain during COVID. It's been a tough time. I think the main thing that came through for me, though, and I was wondering if you're going to talk about, it seems like you're able to balance the long game of maintain what our values are and look to the future. Maintain the long game whilst fighting the challenge of today. How did you and your team manage to get the two right?
I'd like to say there was a simple formula, but the truth for all of us with COVID is nobody had answers. You know, we all took comfort and none of us were in control, and we were all kind of trying to work our way through it together. There's a comfort in that. I think the components that came together, first and foremost, is always our people. At those times where you're most concerned about looking after your team, our team stand up twice as strong. For each other, for the customer, for a number of reasons. But the culture of our business shines the brightest when the team are under the most pressure. I think the second piece is we take a very long-term view to our suppliers, and we really spend a lot of time talking to our suppliers, getting to know them as businesses, getting to know them as people, and establishing really good relationships with them. It's important to have great professional relationships that you lean on based on data and tenders and all the other great stuff that procurement people do. But people like working with people. And I think having trust with our suppliers in really being able to sit across the table from each other and say, we're both here for you. What's the struggles in your organization that we need to be flexible and help you? And how can you return that as well? So we survive through this together. I'm delighted to say, especially in our SME supply base, and you know how deep and strong that is in our organization, James, from your personal work with us, and absolutely especially in the indigenous SME supply base, our team put their arms around them first and foremost and made sure that we pivoted, whether it be the way we work, our ordering profile, our delivery profile, our working capital profile, to do absolutely everything we could to make sure those businesses remained viable financially and could continue the employment of their people through this, because we want them to be there the other side. They're part of our business for a reason. And I think our suppliers trust that we don't sacrifice people easily. So all tough decisions, lots of hard work, but it's come back to deep engagement with customers. We're here to help. What do you need? Deep engagement with suppliers. How can we help each other? What do we need to do? And then that fundamental belief that we can act really quickly with agility and adapt how we work, make quicker decisions, get out of each other's way, and just crack our way through it until the problem's solved.
The other thing that came to mind whilst we were waiting for questions is how much capacity do the suppliers have, the SME suppliers have, to provide you with data, or do you need to create that yourself and provide it back to them?
That's a really, really good question. Thank you. Having worked in, 17 countries now, I've kind of got used to the fact that my assumptions, certainly of data and technology in one country, may not be the same in another. So having worked in industries in the European Union or the UK, the quality of data that's available from institutes and organizations and benchmarking bodies can be overwhelming at times. Some countries you go to, there's just nothing. So I think what we found very quickly on engaging with our suppliers is many of our suppliers have not invested in technology and data at the level that we'd either assumed or I'd assumed based on other country experience. And therefore, we've had to take an initial mantle at building systems that provides data back to suppliers. So many of our suppliers have started us with us telling them what their default score was. And over time, through having that long-term view of our relationship suppliers, it gives us mutual confidence in each other to therefore invest in some very sexy technology, or sometimes it's just very manual processes that the supplier now grows their business to tell us what their performance is. So I think there's a lot of hard yards to go in the industry. I think the recognition of data being powerful, especially now that everybody's doubly looking at labor costs and overall organizational costs, because we don't know how quickly the consumer base is going to come back. We don't know how punishing a recession could be and whether it will be a V or W shaped recession. Data is becoming really, really, really valuable to the CFO and the COO. And I think collectively we're walking up to, there's a massive gap in the marketplace that people are now prepared to invest in.
That leads on to a question from Ali, who says, first off, thanks for the interesting presentation, but he also, or he or she asks, let's talk about blockchain technology. How is that going to impact supply chain, especially food supply chain?
Let me come off mute. Thank you, Ali, for the question. Really appreciate it. Blockchain is very, very interesting. I think there's some way to go yet in many industries to truly understand not what blockchain can do, but what's the true value of its implementation. It's great to be a first adopter, but first adopter and continued value is an interesting combination. I think it has massive opportunity on provenance and origin of food and tracing the pathway of food as it's moved internationally, especially when you think about the Australian market and its recent legislation of modern day slavery. I think there's a huge opportunity that blockchain can play in giving different levels of visibility of international moving products and services and people and financials. Domestically, I'm not quite sure yet. I think blockchain is a very new finance mechanism, but I think it's here to stay, and I think clever people will work out how they now scale blockchain to different applications in different industries and spread that value. I think domestically it's not quite there yet in food supply, but I'm sure it will be. Your second question is around digitisation. The easy answer to that is we have full-time technology architects in our business, which I think is, I don't know of any other, I've not been part of any other procurement organization that's invested in that particular skill set. So we've got data scientists who build incredibly easy to look at visuals with amazing engines behind them I'll never understand. And fundamentally, we've become an organization that has been, like many of us, quite wary of investing in capital projects with technology without deep business cases, to actually running harder and wanting more, and we've become very technology orientated. So live dynamic data is key for us, and we continue to get better in that. We have artificial intelligence in our business, and new applications being developed by some very clever external organizations, helping us to drive that insight from data. And we see both in the consumer self-serve and our team, the biggest opportunity to allow our people to spend more time with the customer or more time with the supplier, whether you're customer facing or a buyer. That productivity equation will fundamentally be answered by digitisation. Another question from, I'll probably pronounce your name wrong, Avinash. My apologies if I pronounce your name wrong. Thank you for your question. Do I think visualization of data is important as the actual analysis? No, I think they're mutually together. If you haven't got interesting stuff to visualize, no one's going to read it. So you've got to have that analysis capability. And it's, again, analysis for me is about insights. Clever people can look at lots of columns and data and find things interesting. What I'm interested in is, what's the message to the client? What's the recommendation? What's the opportunity? What's the outcome? What do we want to talk to the customer about and get them to support? And for that, you need visualization. I think making complex insights easily digestible and compelling is a real, almost an art form. And if you can do that, your ability to engage customers quickly, frequently, and in a compelling way, as long as your insights are compelling, is extremely powerful. So I struggle with, I don't think you can be optimal unless you've got both working together.
Us consultants love those fancy graphs though, Andy. That's what we provide to you. One last question, and it's one that comes up in ASCI Queensland all the time, and it's around one of your passions, modern day slavery. How can we use things such as data and your processes to ensure we understand whether there is any modern day slavery aspects to our upstream supply to our suppliers?
That's a really, really good question, and a very immediately relevant question as well, given the legislation that's now in Australia. I'm kind of proud and humbled to be part of an organisation that is, the group is listed in the UK stock market, and they've had modern day slavery legislation since 2015. So there's a lot of experience there for us to draw on as we step into the Australian market, whose legislation is kind of similar but different. I think this is an area that needs significant investment. I think the will, the purpose, the desire, the shared values is absolute, and so it should be. I think the quality of data around where products come from, how they're manufactured, whether it's imported or domestically, is going to be absolutely key to this solution. I'd love all organizations to have unlimited travel budgets where you could walk the path of the supply chain right down to its source, whether it's the grower in Queensland or the forest in Colombia. That's never going to happen, right? So we are dependent on organizations, their data, their ability to audit, their ability to be in those locations, and sharing information between organizations. I don't think anybody here should have an ownership on supply chain data. I think we should be sharing it, because no one organization is going to solve modern day slavery in coffee in Colombia. Collectively, the industry has to come together and say, what are we going to do about this? How do we protect the workers? How do we protect the economy? And at the same time, look after human rights? And those are never easy questions to walk through. So I think if there's any area that I hope smart technology, data, and new business owners and existing business owners step into. It's helping organizations easily get visibility of extended supply chains, and able to come together in forums like this and solve those issues, or share data to make sure that those issues aren't in their supply chain. I think it's a huge open space at the minute that there's unfortunately not a solution there for.
Great answer, as always, and a great discussion. As I said at the top, we wanted to provide a webinar that pushed the thoughts, got us thinking about what supply chain is about, and it was a great delight to have you with us, Andy, to talk about procurement and food buy, which sounds interesting, but also explore those other issues of culture and people, how to engage everyone in the supply chain, and how to even address, as we just did, modern day slavery. So thank you very much. Will I hand you back to Monique? Will I hand back to you, Monique, now, or what's the next part?
Yeah, sounds great. Can everyone please raise their hand to thank Andy, Fergus and James for their fantastic presentation today. And as I turn to the next slide, in the chat box, you'll see the registration link for next week's webinar, which is on a similar topic of contracts. So again, procurement, but smart contracts. And so we hope you join us then. Thank you very much for joining us today. Bye for now.